Robbie Hart, bonjour and bienvenue au le bookshelf conversations. And that's the extent of my French, so we'll leave it at that.
Bonjour à toi. Wonderful to be part of your show. No worries.
So we're here today to talk about your new documentary film, Nos Amours, the saga of the Montreal Expos. Uh, my family, my mother's side, comes from Montreal, so I'm very vested in what goes on with Montreal baseball. I My aunt lived about a 40-minute walk from Jerry Park, so when I was younger, I used to walk over there to see the Expos play. Unfortunately, sitting on the first base side at dusk when the sun was setting, and that was always a challenge. Why did you decide to do this film?
Well, first off, I did a. This is my second film on the Expos. Okay, so it runs deep my relationship with the team and with the city of Montreal. In '98, I made a film about trying to keep the Expos in Montreal. It was also titled just Nos Amours, not the saga of the Montreal Expos. And when I did volume two, if you'd like, or the sequel, Nos Amours, the saga of the Montreal Expos. So the first film really was about actually trying to keep them in Montreal. I filmed from '98 to 2002, and then the film was released in 2003, and it was pretty much, you know, predetermined that the team would no longer be in Montreal. But that film was about trying to keep them there, and a lot of different, a lot of the film was about that. And then, of course, in 2012, I started working on a film about bringing them back. So there's two different stories, but it runs deep in my life. My love affair with the Montreal Expos, and in both cases, I'm an engaged documentary filmmaker. I've made over 60 films, and it was like a natural for me to just follow this calling, of bringing back the Expos. I mean, Warren Cromartie arrives in Montreal, has a press conference in April 2012, and he says, "My goal is to bring back the Expos." And we know what happens, as you saw in the film. It just snowballs into like this movement to bring back the Expos. Major League Baseball holds preseason games. Cromartie brings a whole bunch of players back, alumni. Stephen Brofman gets involved. There's conversations. There's money. There's over $1 billion put on the table. There's a whole group of investors. Then there's conversations with Tampa. So it really ramped up all the way up to 2021. People would say to me, "Robbie, what are you going to do if they don't come back? What's going to be the ending to your film?" Well, I said, "Well, not every film has a happy ending," and and the idea was, or a Hollywood ending, anyways. And I said, I'm going to make this film about the Expos trying to bring them back, but at the same time, it's going to be the historical, biblical film about the team in its greatest moments. So it's a two for one, really. Nos Amours, the saga of the Montreal Expos is the resurrection story, but it's also the biblical historical story of the Expos.
You have some very interesting, I don't know what you would call them, talking heads, guests. Uh, One that particularly resonated with me was Katie Hines. Now, what is her story, and why did you include her? She seems like an Uber fan.
Yeah, she is an Uber fan. In fact, she as you saw in the film, she was in my first film. There's scenes of her and me together from the 1998 2002 film. So yeah, Katie and I have been friends ever since '98. I met her at a rally. It was 10,000 people marching from Olympic Stadium to downtown. Basically, you know, asking at that time, I think it was Lucien Bouchard who was in power, just saying, "We want to keep the Expos here. We need a downtown ballpark." And I met her that day, and we've been friends ever since. And she's just this. Her email address is Katie Queen of the Big O at hotmail.com.
The
She hasn't missed a game. I don't think she missed a game in 30 years.
Wow. The who is of the two communities, the French and the Anglo communities, who would you say are the bigger baseball supporters? Because Montreal, I see your Canadiens towel over there. Montreal's been known as a hockey town. So what's the
Oh,
ratio?
it goes on both sides. It's as you saw Terry Mosher, his
Mhm.
drawing in the Gazette. You know, he has a guy with a Canadian flag and a guy, a guy with a Quebec flag, and one's drinking a bottle of beer called beer, and the other one's drinking a bottle of beer called bière, and they're holding each other's arms. And it's an east, and it was titled East West. French and English in Montreal, East Side, West Side. So yeah, I know. Listen, obviously there was an historical connection with Jewish Montreal because of the Bronfman family. And a lot of people from that community were always on the first base side at Jarry in the old days. So the Bronfman family had its network of fans, but I mean, it's Montreal's team, and it's French and English. It's not a linguistic thing, and the financial support, was coming from this latest initiative from the Bronfman family, from Mitch Garber, but also on the French side from the owner of Couche-Tard, which is a famous dépanneur chain in Quebec and across, in fact, in the United States. So there was a lot of money coming from both communities.
So, well, where do things stand now with that? Is there still a strong
Very
interest?
disappointing.
Sorry?
Well, I think it's very disappointing.
Uh,
I think Stephen, the film did revitalize Stephen because he was very, very disappointed when the Twin City project got nuked. He was really led to believe, and so was Stuart Sternberg, the owner of the Rays, that it was going to happen, that there was a green light for it to happen. The sister city, two cities, one team concept, which had a lot of merit. At the beginning, I was a bit skeptical, but as time went on, I really warmed up to the idea and saw the logic behind it, the rationale, and how it could work economically and for both cities. So it's a concept that was nuked, though, in the end by the MLB executive. Stephen, though, still believes in bringing baseball back to Montreal. And the next window really is expansion, which is 2028. And Montreal is at the top of the list of teams. Now, whether he actually formalizes, a bid remains to be seen. I connect with Stephen on a regular basis. He hasn't said yes or no. But 2028 is expansion. MLB is going to expand. And Montreal is the largest market in North America without a city. And my film and the whole effort to bring back baseball put Montreal back on the radar screen in a very big way in the eyes of Major League Baseball. So we'll see what happens in 2028 or 2027 when I guess the bid will have to be crystallized.
now, Warren Cromartie was a big fan favorite with the Expos, uh, as was Rusty Starr, because these guys got into the culture of Montreal. They learned the language. They were very popular. Why is he so invested in this? Cromartie,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
of course. No,
Yeah.
I mean Warren still talks about like finding a Japanese investor and that he's gonna, that 2028 is gonna happen. And listen, he loved the city. He played AAA in Quebec City, but the Carnaval. That's where that was Montreal. The Expos farm club was in Quebec City. So he spent all those guys, Carter, Parrish, Valentine, Cromartie, they all were in Quebec City for 2 years before coming up to Montreal. So he married a Quebecois woman. His daughter was born here. He played 8 seasons in Montreal. He loves the city, and it's just wanted to make it happen. He was the spark plug. He got it going. He got us to first base, and then Stephen got us to third base, and then we got stranded at third.
Hmm. One of the problems in the most recent years of the Expos was the fact that they played at Olympic Stadium, which was kind of in the middle of nowhere. Uh, there were no, there wasn't a downtown area. There were no shops. There were no stores. There was nothing other than the ballpark and maybe the botanical gardens there. Where are they thinking about, if it comes to that, where are they thinking about putting a new stadium?
Well, as you saw in the film, the space is right there. It's the Peel Basin. It's right, down right off of downtown. I'm sure, I presume you saw the scene in the film where with me and Stephen, we do a walkabout.
Mhm.
We experienced the whole thing. It's literally 5 minutes from the downtown core, with an incredible view of the mountain and the city and such. But I do want to contest your point of view about the Olympic Stadium. The Olympic Stadium had nothing to do with the Expos' downfall, or nor the fact that attendance was weak. I mean, the Olympic Stadium was an amazing venue for over 15, 20 years. It had nothing to do with the Expos, fall from grace. I concur with you that was not built to be a ballpark, but it had nothing to do with the Expos' demise.
I stand corrected then. I know I spent in 2000 and the year before they were transferred to Washington. I spent the last homestand of the season because I expected them to be gone. And I was working on a manuscript about the demise of the Expos, but they lasted one more year, so that took care of all my
Mm-hmm.
all my prep work. But the business of the sister city with Tampa Bay splitting time between because they were having
Yeah,
trouble down in their home.
they still are.
They still are. Why was I mean I know there's some reluctance because of uh, the tax situation. Ball players would have to pay Canadian taxes and American taxes, and that kind of makes it a little bit unattractive for some players. But why was there such animosity, for lack of a better word, for the Rays playing in Montreal?
Well, there was no opposition to it here in Montreal. Everybody was
No.
behind it.
Yeah.
The city of Montreal was behind it. The provincial government was behind it. Obviously, the Stuart Sternberg and the whole Tampa Bay ownership group was behind it. And you look at the model. You're looking at two investor groups, so basically two bank accounts. So it's a wealthier team, right? And you have two different groups that are financing it. So A would be more competitive and would have a higher payroll, uh, and the players would be better paid, and there would be more job security. So just on that level, you're talking about, and then you have two fan bases. You have more ticket sales because there's only 40 games. So the games in Montreal would begin in June and run up into the end of the season, when it's incredible. Montreal's like,
Mhm.
the best city in North America, June, July, August, and September. Uh, and they would be March, April, and May in Tampa when it's actually, nice to be in Tampa. And where, in fact, there's a ton of Canadian snowbirds or Quebec snowbirds in the Florida region. So there was a symmetry between the two schedules, them being in Tampa during the spring, then coming up to Montreal in the summer. You have uh, you know, two different ownership groups with more dollar muscle to finance the team, and the resistance, though you use the word animosity, the resistance to it from Major League Baseball is because it's never been done, and
Yeah.
so since it's never been done, with a very conservative, call them governors,
Mhm.
in MLB. I guess there was, I think the vote was 8-4.
Hmm.
So there were four. Obviously, Sternberg voted for it, and I believe a few others did, and there were others that voted against it, saying we're not going down this path. It's a little too kooky, or it's just we don't want to take baseball down that path. So that's where it got killed. Will other professional sports actually do that? I mean, look, baseball doesn't have a salary cap. So, that's a big problem, right? All professional sports, including the NBA and the NFL, and of course the NHL, have a ceiling and a floor. And it generates parity. I mean, look, the Dodgers and the Yankees, yes, they pay a luxury tax and there is revenue sharing, but there's no limits on how much they can spend. So the rich get richer in baseball, and the poor get poorer. So there is an issue there, in terms of I call it the financial, the financial and fiscal reality of MLB.
Well, the Blue Jays just signed Vlad Guerrero Jr. for an astronomical salary.
No, this is great news. I mean, this is fantastic news for Toronto. I can't believe Guerrero did it. I'm actually, he held out. and now they pulled the plug, and they're having a good start to the season. So Toronto, it's exciting. I like what they're doing. They brought in some good players too. So, you know, the idea is that Montreal and Tampa would have, you take a like a Kansas City or a Pittsburgh or Milwaukee. These are really small markets.
Mhm.
I mean, Oakland just lost its team because of that, right? And you obviously need to be competitive in different ways, right? Drafting, developing players, windows of opportunity. I mean, it exists even in the NHL. I mean, you even though there is a salary cap, you still have to be creative in terms of managing your dollars and how to maximize the window of opportunity that you do have to put together a championship team. We look at the Montreal Canadiens right now are in a position to have a playoff contending, Stanley Cup contending team for the next 10 years, basically, with what they've got going. And that was a quick rebuild. Having Tampa and Montreal together, having Sternberg and Brofman as the principal owners, you're looking at like doubling, the amount of money you have available. Plus, you have double broadcast revenues as well, because you have two different cities with two different platforms. You have French and English. You have more radio. You have more media. You know what I mean? Even if the team would be in Tampa, we're going to be following it. It's our team. And whether the team's up in Montreal, well, the Rays fans are going to be following it, on TV, on radio, in the press, or whatever. So it's just like the idea really gained a lot of steam. In the beginning, it was like, I want to bring the Expos back, but then I warmed up to the X-rays, as we were playing. And that's how she wrote. Unfortunately, it didn't come to be.
That's a great name, the X-Rays. You talk about championship teams, and of course, the best chance the Expos had to be a
Yes.
championship team were in two of seasons that were destroyed by strikes, 1981 and 1994.
Yeah.
And then you had the change of ownership with Claude Brochu coming in and Jeffrey Loria coming in, and Loria kind of, I guess in retrospect, you would consider him a carpetbagger for coming in with high expectations and then pretty much selling off all the stars of the team or trading them away, which he also did when he took over the Miami Marlins.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jeffrey Lurie never had any intentions of making it work in Montreal. I mean, he you know, first first strike is against Claude Brochu and the Quebec owners that took over from Charles Bronfman.
Mhm.
They are the principal, from my point of view, the principal culprits, if you like, for the demise of the Expos. I mean, the strike in '94 was an act of God. I mean, there had never been a strike in Major League Baseball prior that actually canceled the World Series. There was no
Mhm.
World Series in 1994, the year the Expos would have won it or been in it, let's say. So that in itself had nothing to do with Montreal or the Olympic Stadium or even Claude Brochu. But Claude Brochu and the consortium of Quebec owners, which I call Quebec Inc., because there was about 6 or 7 companies that were part of the ownership group. In '95, after the strike ended, shortened season, decided to not reinvest in the team. They were very short-sighted, and that was the beginning of the end. Right there, they lost Walker, they lost Wetland, they lost Grissom, and
Mhm.
Alou. Now, what the hell are you doing? I mean, you're giving away. You have this championship caliber team. They needed maybe 20 million to keep everyone happy and on board. Re-sign these guys, and they divested. It was a fire sale. So I mean, that is where the nail in the coffin was that was the first big nail in the coffin. I mean, yes, the strike was something that hurt, but it wasn't something that we controlled. Whereas Quebec Inc., Claude Brochu and Company had the resources, had the money, but they didn't have the balls, if you don't mind the expression, to actually do it. And they divested. And if you don't invest in your product, you kill your product. And that was a big knife into the heart of the fan base. Those fire sales. And then there were others. In '97, there was 2 other fire sales. So they basically divested rather than invest, and that killed the Expos. Jeffrey Loria was he exploited the situation simply to get his foot in the door. He always wanted to be an MLB owner, and he saw the opportunity. There was a crack in the door. He came in, but he never had intentions of making it work. And he started sabotaging it from the beginning with his little right arm punk, David Sampson.
Let's talk about the production of the film. Uh, the first film was about Nos Amours. The second film was the Saga of the Expos. Talk about the production values. Talk about what it was like putting this thing together, because it's obviously some was archival footage, some were interviews. Uh, so talk about that a little bit.
Of course, of course. Well, it was a 10-year production. I started
Mm.
filming in 2012, and I didn't stop filming until 2021. And that was the goal of the film, to follow the story, to follow the resurrection story. Where is this going to go? It starts with Cromartie at the press conference, and I want to bring back baseball to Montreal, and I followed that story. And in documentary, you know, sometimes it's like a river. It has a beginning, but you don't know where the end is. You got to follow the river, and you got to keep rowing down the river until there's a conclusion. And the conclusion occurred, but it was a great ride because things kept progressing. The whole it went from a little spark, like, oh my god, like, people said, bringing back the Expos, are you out of your mind? Like, it's not going to happen, or it's a long shot, or you're dreaming. You know what I mean? And that idea grew into something very tangible. As I said, there was nothing happening, and then Cromartie got us to first base, and then Stephen Brofman got us all the way to third base, and it was on the rails. But it took 2012, 2014, 15, 16, when the Blue Jays kept coming to play exhibition games in Montreal. There was 100,000 people, 50,000 each game. It was wild. As you saw in the film, those scenes were magical. There hadn't been baseball played in Montreal for 10 years at the Olympic Stadium, professional baseball. So the thing just kept growing. And then Sternberg and Brofman in the same bed, basically, making this deal to Sister City, the X-Rays. And so it really grew. And I followed the story. So, from a filmmaking perspective, the idea was follow the story, the resurrection story. And at the same time, as you see in the film, almost 2/3 of the film is the biblical story. And it's the Jarry years, Rusty Staub returning, the Gary Carter and his passing, the '94 team, Jeffrey Loria, the strike, all the '81, Blue Monday saga. So all those kind of, we'll call them iconic moments in Expos history are chronicled in the film. So the film has, a lot of people complimented me for what I achieved, because it's the definitive documentary on the Montreal Expos. No one else will do this, and it's the reference, and it's, as I say, the story of trying to bring them back, and at the same time, it's the biblical historical, opus, if you like, or saga.
Now, you mentioned expansion is coming in 3 years. Are you preparing anything, a documentary project that will include that?
No, everybody says we're, jamais 203, or three's a charm, because I've done now 2 films on the Expos. I don't see myself doing a third, though, to be honest. I think I've really given myself to this subject, this story. I'm never going to say no to anything, but I mean, you never know. You never know what happens, right? I mean, anything's possible. Stephen Brofman says that at the end of the film when he's crying, basically.
Mhm.
It's like 3 weeks after he got the news. He says, "Who knows what's going to happen? Anything's possible," right? So you never say 100% no, but to be honest, I think I've done my part, and I've fulfilled also my calling. Like, I got to live my dream. Of being with the players, of hanging out with Philippe Pelou, with getting, just being part of that Expos story and living the Expos nostalgia, and trying to help bring them back. I mean, the film in itself is a vehicle advocate for baseball in Montreal, of course, and how Montreal wants and believes and can support baseball. And so that part in itself has been accomplished. There's no doubt. And I've sent a copy to Rob Manfred, and I'm sure he's watched it. So, you know, that initiative in itself has contributed to the legacy of the Montreal Expos, the history and memory of the Montreal Expos, and also potentially to their return.
Well, let's hope you're right because as I can't call myself a Montreal expatriate because I was born in the States, but as someone who has ancestry there and very fond memories of being in Montreal for many summers and other times, I really hope that something can be done. We've been talking with Robbie Hart, director and writer and producer of Amours, the Saga of the Montreal Expos. Robbie, thanks so much for talking with us today.
That was excellent. Thanks so much, Ron.